Welcome to this awesome episode of Entrepreneur School, where I am chatting with my guest, Melissa Clampitt. She is a guide for high achieving yet overwhelmed mamas, women that want to do it all but are left stressed out, unsure about how much more they can take. She supports them to drop the supermom facade so they can actually start to enjoy their life, live in alignment, and experience more ease and joy. She's also a podcast host of the Reawakened Mom Podcast. She's a dynamic speaker, a wife, and boy mama to three. And holy, did we have a great conversation about what it actually means to live in harmony and how we can identify what we need for ourselves so that we can let go of what we feel like everybody else is telling us that we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to behave, and what it actually means, like to be a good mother or to be a good whatever roles that you play in your life. So I'm really excited for you to dive into this one. It is also a really great follow-up episode, although totally unintentional to the episode that we did, that I did solo about my review of the book Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. So we actually talked about that a little bit. She hasn't read it, so it was really interesting. So I will link that below in the show notes as well if you want to jump back and listen to that. And you will also find me on Melissa's podcast, and I will link that below as well when that episode becomes live. Melissa and I met when I was doing a guest training inside of a mutual friend's group. And I was teaching about media and PR, and my little youngest daughter came home and started spinning her chair around and literally broke my desk. So I'm like training and teaching about getting media, and all of a sudden my desk becomes broken. So it was quite hilarious. And Melissa and I connected after that. So I'm excited to introduce her to you today, and I hope that you enjoy this episode. Hello, welcome, Melissa, to Entrepreneur School. I'm so excited to talk to you, especially after I know that you just had a dance party to prep for this conversation. So I'm already feeling that really great energy from you.
Awesome. Yeah, I love to do that just to like get my energy right? Because we all go through so many things. Like who knows what either one of us were doing before we recorded this podcast episode. So I just like to like kind of zone in on like my focus and my energy and be like, I'm ready for this. It's going to be the best, most amazing conversation ever.
Yes, as I was telling you, I was interrupted by my brother with my children who are not supposed to be home. They just came home to collect some items to go out and hang out with their uncle for the day. So I was like, I'm going to need a minute because now dogs are running around and people are places they're not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And that's fine because we are trying to fit all of these things, these podcasts, these different things that we're doing for our businesses into the life that we have. And that's kind of the conversation that you and I are going to have today about harmony and being a mom and having like a different way of looking at it that allows you to feel good about what you're doing, because there's sort of this, you know, invisible but not invisible thing out there where you feel this pressure to do it all,
Yeah.
right? And we're ambitious, and that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And we also want to be great mothers, and we want to do all these other things. And then you're supposed to like fit in self-care and do all of this. And, right now we're at the beginning of a new year, but no matter what time of year that it is, all of these things kind of come into play. And we start to think about how we're actually going to manage it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to just dive into that conversation with you and give a little bit of your background as to how you came to like be an authority on this topic.
I'm in the 30 because I have been a mom for almost 20 years now. I have been married for almost 20 years, but I actually have an older stepson. So I have a 30-year-old stepson, which is crazy to even think about. But an older stepson, I have a 17-year-old and I have a 14-year-old. So I am like knee deep in teenager testosterone, like all of the craziness in my home. It's myself and my female cat. Like that's all I got here. And she's probably gonna like, I had to close my door. You were talking about your dogs, but I have to close my door because if not, when she hears me in here talking, she wants to jump up and be with me and cuddle, and like her tail is like all in my face. So I have to recognize that as well. But For me, my journey started when I became a mom, so a stepmom, and then a mom when I used to be a school teacher. And I had this knowing. I always knew I wanted to be a mom. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, but I had no idea when I became pregnant that I would actually want to be at home with my then 17-year-old who was a baby at the time. And it just kind of came out of nowhere. It was never a dream of mine. I had never seen that anywhere else. I had never seen anyone staying at home. Everyone always worked, right? Like, I'm not sure how old you are. I'm 46. So the mentality when I was growing up was you get a job, you stay in that job, you work in that job till you're ready to retire, and then you can enjoy your life, right? Then you can
Yeah.
retire and enjoy the fruits of all your labor. So that's what I thought. I was like, oh, I'm going to teach. I'm going to teach till I'm 30 years, and then I can retire and do all these amazing things and go on vacations. But there was this deep knowing inside of me when I was pregnant, and I really wanted to be able to be with my kids and my kids at the time. And so my journey kind of started there with just like starting to listen to myself, starting to live outside the box. I had no idea what network marketing was at the time, and I joined a network marketing company. I thought it was like something illegal. I was like, there's no way I can make money from home. I literally was like, am I selling my body? Like, am I selling drugs? I was like, what do you mean I can make money from home? Because this was back in 2006, and it wasn't as big as it is now. And it was the most amazing thing. And during that time, for me, when I left my teaching career, I started being home with my boys. I had my next son when I was at home 3 years later, and that's when this overwhelm really started for me because I was trying to, like you said earlier, do all the things. I was trying to be the perfect mom. I was trying to be the perfect wife. I was trying to be the perfect volunteer. I was like president of the Moms Club. I had a business of my own. So I was trying to do all these things. And then I would go in my closet or go into my bedroom when I could find a minute to myself or when my kids went to bed. And I would just cry because I was like, I had no idea how I was going to keep it up the next day. I had no idea how, I always like to call it like a facade, this super mom facade. I had no idea how I could keep that going the next day because we are high achievers and I wanted to be a high achiever at everything that I did. So I really started to question, like, is this really what this is like? Like, this is not what I thought motherhood would be like. This is not what I thought staying at home, which I had the honor and privilege to do, like owning a business, like all these things that I wanted to do and said yes to. I didn't know how I was going to keep it going because I realized I was saying no to myself. And I think that's so much of what motherhood we find, especially early on for me, was that I was saying no to myself all of the time. I had no place on my plate where I was like doing anything for myself because I thought at the time that old story of this is what a good mom does. Like she sacrifices until, and typically it's until that breaking point happens. And it can happen over and over and over again until you're ready to be like, okay, that's it. Like I have to make a change. So that's kind of where this started for me and just making like simple shifts and things for myself. So I don't know if you want to stop here and say anything because I could talk forever.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I love that you first of all acknowledged like that you wanted something different than what you even thought and what you had been shown in your own life, because it's true. I think that sort of this generation, and I'm a little bit younger than you, but we follow like what we've seen, and we get to be the trailblazers and create sort of new versions of what's possible, which is an amazing opportunity. It's also very like stressful, right?
Mhm.
Because now you're like, oh, what does this look like, and how do I, demonstrate and role model this for my kids
Mhm.
and show them that they can make these kinds of choices. So you were talking about being overwhelmed there. Did you have a breaking point where you realized that this is not sustainable?
Yeah, I was working. So I always worked from home. So even though like I was staying at home with my kids, I never had a moment where I did not have a job. So I had my network marketing job. So I had a team of women and then I was going out and doing home parties. I sold jewelry. So there was a lot of time when I was out of the house, which you could say that was time for myself, but I was still working, right? I was still on the clock. I still had to perform once I got to this party. Um, and I loved that camaraderie, but I really started to get lonely. I really started to feel lost in myself. I didn't have anything outside of that that was just for me. I
Mm,
took my kids to like swim. I took my kids to singing classes. Like we did all of these things together, and I didn't have anything that I could say this was really just mine. Because working, I also needed to help provide for the family and have that extra income coming in because I left my teaching career, which doing that in above in itself was so challenging because so many people were naysayers. Even my own family, where it was like, you're leaving your career, like you're leaving this steady income, you're leaving your pension, you're leaving insurance, all of these things to stay at home. And it wasn't to be like to bash staying at home, but it was like, are you crazy? And so, I'm not new to these pivotal moments, I like to call them, of doing things that are kind of different. And I haven't seen it before because I've done it in before even leaving teaching. But for me, like that point when I really couldn't take it anymore was my husband actually was getting ready to do an Ironman. Like we had talked about this, right? Like if you don't know what an Ironman is, you run a marathon, you swim 2 miles, and then you bike for like 114 or 140 miles. So it's pretty intense. So he was working full time. We had talked about, I'm like, you should totally do this. And then I started to get resentful. I
mm-hmm.
started to get resentful of him because he was getting to leave the house. He was getting to leave the house on his own to work out, to go swim, to go ride the bike. Even though he was working insane, I was so jealous and I was starting to get angry and resentful because here I am, I'm stuck at home. Like I'm stuck at home again. I got to do all these things and I'm looking around and I'm seeing the house a mess and the dishes that are dirty and the laundry that's piling up and my kids are playing or they want to play with me. And I'm like, but my list, like I have so many things that I have to do. Like I don't get to do anything for myself. And that I would say was really, I think, the start of my turning point to realizing like there has to be a better way.
Yeah. Have you read the book Fair Play?
No.
Okay. Well, we're gonna have a follow-up conversation to this, but I'm gonna drop it here because I did actually do a whole episode about it because I read the
Mm,
book and it was literally like the same kind of concept of just that invisible labor that we take on, right? And that we put everything onto our plates. And even when we have a partner who is, engaged and supportive and helpful, in some ways, we're still doing most of the mental load of those jobs. Like we might be like, here's the list, but we thought about the list and we created the list and they just implement. But there's
yeah.
three parts to any task, and that is the conception, the planning, and the execution. And
Yeah.
so often we're not taking all three of those. In order for it to actually be off your plate, you got to get rid of all three of those things and
Yeah.
pass it on to someone else. And one of the things that they talk about in the book is this concept of unicorn time, which is the time that you spend for yourself just to like light yourself up, fill your own bucket. That's not
Mhm.
necessarily about exercise because that's personal care. But if something like an Ironman is a goal that you have and that you want to work towards, then that is like your
Mhm.
unicorn time. But I can totally see that how you get, resentful and jealous because you're like, oh, I'm being a good supportive wife, like like suggesting my husband do this and saying that I support this. And then I'm feeling the pressure of
Mhm.
what I'm picking up because I'm also giving him that too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a
Yeah.
lot. And
Yeah.
this also just makes me think too, like it's interesting to even just have a conversation about what overwhelm actually is, because I think for me, I didn't even realize like overwhelm one probably sounds like a weakness. And so I don't want to like identify with that, right? Because I'm stubborn and independent and I can do it
Mm.
all kind of
Yeah.
mentality. But it's so easy to become overwhelmed dealing with all of these daily tasks. Like it is not it like it does take up your mental capacity. It does take energy to think about what's for dinner, to figure out like how you're going to fit in exercise, to plan all your kids' social activities and all of the things that they need, and making sure that they have new baseball cleats and like that you have a hotel booked for the tournament that weekend, and all that stuff like takes stuff off of you, and it is not worth less
Yeah.
than you going out and actually doing work. And I think that sometimes either A, we feel like other people are going to judge us that shouldn't take like that it shouldn't be
Yeah.
overwhelming, or B, that we just haven't all associated the fact that all of these things are worth the same to our
Mhm.
family. Like we
Yeah.
equally have, like, all time is worth the same. That's one of the concepts from that book as well. Like it's not just time spent earning money is worth more than time spent cleaning the house or planning the activities or the summer camps or the whatever. It's all worth the same
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
all needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I mean, that's really where it started for me. And like exactly what you said, it was that like, I don't have to do it all mentality. And, I do this presentation on this, and that's like just a tip. Like, I have like 5 tips to like drop the supermom facade, or you could call it add more harmony. But for me, it was like that super mom because I was like, oh yeah, like at the time I thought I was a super mom. I'm like, look at all these things that I could do. But then secretly I was like crushing it. I was like crying like in my bathroom. And so then I was like, you know what? I actually don't have to do it all. And I think that is like such a great message to share because we as women and entrepreneurs and, all the different hats that we're trying to wear and the success, like what success actually means to us, which I think is great that you said like that time, like all time can be equal. And is equally important no matter if you're out making money or you're caring for your family. It's all equally important. And I think it's that mentality of what we think success is. And
Yeah.
is success only about making money, or is success only about your achievements, or what is success actually to you? And is success like leaving your kids and going to work? Like, what is it actually for you? Because it's going to be a different definition for each of us. But that not having to do it all, and like one of the first things that I had to learn was that I had to ask for help. And that was
Mhm.
like one of the hardest things because just like you were sharing, like for me asking for help, it felt like I was weak, like I didn't have it together, like I wasn't strong enough, like I wasn't good enough, like all of the different things of asking for help. It meant like I didn't have everything planned out. Like it meant I was a failure. I'm a perfectionist, right? So a recovering perfectionist. So like, how would that look if I'm asking for help? Does it mean I'm weak? Does it mean I don't know? Whatever. I just all of these different things like go through your head. And for me, that was like the first step for me was really learning how to ask for help in all different kinds of areas, whether that was with work, whether that was talking to my husband, being like, listen, like, I really need to, can we talk about time when I can go and start caring for myself? I actually did roller derby. After I started to realize I don't have anything for myself, I actually did roller derby for 3 years. So we had to work together on, having the kids. Sometimes I had to take them with me, if he was working at the restaurant. So, really asking for help and being able to receive the help that you get and not micromanage the help that you get was really the first thing for me that was it just helped me feel lighter. Like it helped me be able just to take that breath and be like, oh my God, like I don't have to do it all. Like no one's expecting me to. I'm expecting me to
Right.
do it all. And it's
Right.
releasing that expectation that, like, hey, other people can help and that's okay too.
Hmm. I think you sort of answered this in what you just said, but like, I, how do you actually come to terms with that and give yourself that grace to allow for the help and to allow for you to make the changes that you need to actually ultimately live in that harmony that you want
Yeah.
in?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one of the big things is caring for yourself. You kind of talked about like self-care, but I really like to look at caring for self as is not a lot of those external things, but it's really the internal. Because if we don't really know our values, if we don't really know what's important to us, if we don't really know what lights us up, if we don't really know ourselves and what makes us feel anxious, makes us feel stressed out, what we like to do, what we don't like to do, then we aren't going to know what to ask for help for because we're going to think we have to do it all. If we don't really know our strengths, we don't know, our the things that we love, then it's really hard to ask for help. So for me, it was really learning like what do I actually hate doing? What like really annoys the heck out of me? I don't want to clean my house. I don't want to cut the grass. Like what kinds of things is it possible to be able to use someone else who loves to do this, like a cleaning person? They must love to clean, right? Like that's their career. They must love it. So being able to ask someone for help was also looking at the things I don't want to do. So, what kind of things could I outsource that then I can spend my time doing the things that I actually love versus being resentful and mad and angry and doing things that I don't like to do. And then that's going to take out on to my kids. It's going to, lead into my career, my family, my relationships, all of the different things if I am doing these things that I really don't want to do. And that can be like, you don't have to pay somebody else to come clean. Like you could talk to another mom and say, hey, can you watch my kids while I clean? Or can we do a swap? Like, you could do swaps with people so that it's not necessarily like something that you have to pay for. But I think really learning, like, how can you care for yourself? How can you get in touch with the things that you like to do, the things that you don't like to do? How can you really be in tune with what you need in that moment? Maybe you just even need to go take a time out. Like, I like to say, I give myself a mommy time out if I'm getting like all anxious and overwhelmed. But it's also recognizing, if you're feeling that overwhelm, take note of it, right? Like, take notice, like, when do I feel most overwhelmed? Is it, at the end of the night after I've like been working all day, and then I'm going to have to cook, and then I have to clean up the kitchen? Like, notice that, because that's the biggest thing for us, is to notice when we are feeling that overwhelm, when we're feeling stressed, when like we kind of notice our shoulders start to rise. And those are the moments when you need to ask for help. Those are the moments when you need to talk to your spouse and say, listen, I am super stressed out right now. I had a really long day, or I really don't enjoy giving the kids a bath because like something always happens and I get upset and I turn into, I like to call her She-Hulk. She's like my alter ego, that when I start yelling, so it's recognizing those moments in your everyday, and it doesn't just have to be in your house. It can be with your job and your career. If you're like, I hate doing data, I hate doing spreadsheets, I hate doing the finances, then those are times when you can reach out and ask for help. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, I love that actually. One, noticing what actually bothers you, because so often we just think that we have to do all of these things. And it's challenging because we are breaking a paradigm by
Mhm.
saying that no, maybe we don't actually have to do that. Like I know that my dad judges me because I make my husband do the dishes. Like my husband and I have a very clear agreement that I cook and he cleans and I don't touch those dishes. Like I'm not,
I
unless I'm
love
like
it.
made 150 extra dishes, I might wash some of the big bowls, but I'm not doing it. Like I'm cooking and then I am sitting on the couch and I'll chat with him while he does the dishes. And my dad's like, what? How can you like make
Hmm.
your husband do that? And I'm like, well,
Right.
that's our agreement and that's all that matters, right? And so we also went through and made lists of like things that we hate doing and like what we don't mind doing that has to get done, and then things that we love doing, and then like looking at how we could operate differently from that
Hmm.
place. Because like you said, when you know that you're doing a lot of things that are really pulling you down, that's when it like affects everything else that you're doing. You're not being the best version of yourself for your kids, for your business, for your friends, for any relationships that you have. And you need to like adjust the actions that you're taking, right? And
Yeah.
this literally might come down to, this is why this is such a great follow-up conversation to the episode I did on fair play, because I was like so jacked about this idea of like, what if we could just change some things in our own domestic lives? And
Hmm.
how will that affect how we actually can show up and just be, right? Like I had the most relaxing, fun Christmas holiday this year. And I don't think I was stressed out or angry a single time in a week. And I'm going,
Mm,
I need more of this. Like, how do I
yeah.
stay like this? Because this is not normal for me, because I normally have a much, higher like flip point,
Yeah.
or more frequent flip point as to like something that'll get me upset or whatever if something doesn't go as planned, because I'm a big planner. So I don't know like what all has culminated to create that, but it's kind of just this noticing, like you said,
Yeah.
of how, what does it actually take? Like, how do I want to feel? And then once you notice that it's possible, it's how do I maintain this?
Hmm.
Right? By
Yeah.
doing or not doing certain things, or caring or not caring about certain things, even.
Yeah.
But some of these things we just don't even need on our list at all.
Yeah. Well, and what I would say to that too is like to really we can't, even as much as we want to try, because I am a control freak. Oh, and I try not to be, but I also know I cannot control the actions of anyone else. I can only control myself, hopefully most of the time. But I can only control my choices and how I choose to act. Some obviously I still fly off the handle and have moments that I'm not proud of, but it's recognizing that, and recognizing that I need to regulate myself first if I want to try and have that outward change in my family, that ripple effect. I actually was doing a float this morning, and I wasn't moving, but I could feel the water moving just to like my pulse and like my breath and my heartbeat. And I was like, gosh, that mom pulse, right? That mom ripple effect of just these small things. And when we are going inward and when we are making change in ourselves, it makes such a huge change, that ripple effect that it occurs like to our kids, to our husband, to the people around us in our relationships. So I really feel like that overwhelm really has to start with us and that internal dialogue, and what that's going to look like, in our household. Maybe that's where we start. Maybe we start with a relationship with our spouse or our kids, or you start with a relationship with your family and really work on those things to really help have those hard conversations, because they're never easy conversations, but that's just, kind of where it starts.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
boundaries. I mean, boundaries are huge. So, like, I mean, if we have an hour to talk, that's great. I know we don't, but like, boundaries are huge. And that's always something that, a lot of people don't do well. But for me, that's when when I started to say yes to everything and noticed, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed. But like, I have all these things on my plate because I'm a doer and I like to do and I like to you do all these things, but that leads to overwhelm because I'm like, then I have no time, and then I get resentful the things I said yes to. So I think it's also like knowing like what your boundaries are, starting with your values, know yourself, but then look at your boundaries and figure out how you want to set your boundaries, who you want to set them with, and give yourself permission to shift and change those boundaries too. They don't always have to stay the same.
Yes, that's totally like the main theme I think from this conversation is giving yourself permission to be and do and not do whatever
Mhm.
is going to fit for the life that you want to create for yourself. Which is
Yeah.
not an easy task, being like, oh, let's just go journal out for 5 minutes and you'll have it all sorted out, right? But probably start by doing that a little bit if
Yeah.
you have no idea right now, just start observing, right? Like what would be
Yeah.
your advice to someone who is feeling overwhelmed and they're trying to like figure out how to unpack this and make some changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think just what you said, like honestly, like when I'm like a big feeler, like I've like if you watch this on YouTube, if you're watching, like you can't see this in the podcast, but like I'm a hands talker. I'm not even Italian. I don't know. I just talk with my hands, but like I'm constantly just like kind of touching my body and like touching my heart and touching my stomach. And I think so often just from society and the busy and the do and how much we self-sabotage and how much we have that negative self-talk of our bodies, and oh, I'm too big or I'm too fat or I'm too skinny or whatever it is. Like I'm just constantly like touching my heart and touching my stomach to feel like, what does this actually feel like? And just, you don't even have to get quiet for a really long time, but because I know that's uncomfortable for so many of us to stop and be still because we want to
Mhm,
constantly be hustling and going. But if you
mhm,
can just stop and just take a breath, even if you're like in, today I was stuck in traffic, horrible traffic, and you just have a second, you can just touch your body, like touch your being and take a breath. And you can just say, what do I need right now? Like, what do I need right now? And that could be, I need to call a friend. I need, to have a good cry. I need to journal. I need to write something down. I need to get quiet. I need to go out in nature. Like, nature is so nurturing.
mhm,
If you can get back out in nature and just like feel the sun on your face or the wind, or, I hate the cold, but I've been walking recently in the cold because it just feels good to be outside. So I'm just listening to what do I need right now, and that's really how you start. When you can start being aware of your body, start being aware of what you need, not what other people are telling you need. That's when you start to trust yourself. That's when you can start really having these hard conversations, asking for help, realizing what you need to say yes and no to. And that's the beginning. So you can journal it out if you're a journaler, if you like to talk in your voice note, like on your phone, if you like to talk, because I'm a talker, not a writer, like you could talk it out. And sometimes when you just say it, you can release it. And that's just like such a beautiful thing. So there's so many little tricks that you can do, but I think first it's really just starting to like get familiar with yourself again, because so often like we don't even know who we are. And we're just hustling and moving and going, that we don't even know the things that we like to do, that we don't like to do, like what's our viewpoint versus our parents or the societies. So I think that's where I would say just start with something small like that, and like, what do I need right now? And when you can start in that present moment, then you can kind of start to make it a little bit more broad.
yeah, that's so powerful. And I guess underrated, like the importance of knowing what you need and getting in touch with what you need again, because that that helps, like you said, separate that from what you have become conditioned to believe and the habits that you've taken on as
Yeah.
you've gotten to wherever it is that you are now. So, Melissa, before we wrap up, can you tell everyone how you help people go through this process, how you can support them, and how they can find you if they're interested in learning more about it?
Yeah, I think the best thing is to go to my website. I can rattle off like all of my social medias and all these different things, but like my website is just really the easiest place to find me because my social media is on there. I have a new cohort for moms. I specifically love working with moms. Just obviously, I am a mom and I know like where I struggled and I used to be a school teacher. So I just love teaching. I love inspiring. I love having fun. I'm like full of ideas. So I love working together with like moms and cohorts. So I have one that's called New Year Find You, because again, so many of us are lost and don't know where we are. So if you want, I can also include, I have a free masterclass on that whole topic, New Year Find You. And it can be used whether you listen to this podcast in January, or if you listen in March, or if you listen in December or November. You can really take any time and call that like your new year because we're always shifting and changing no matter where we are. But I can include that if you want, and then people can download that and they can watch the replay of that. And I have an amazing workbook that goes with it to really kind of walk you through how to come back to yourself. And I love doing all kinds. I love podcasting. I wrote a compilation book called Bet on Yourself. I have my own podcast, and I don't know, I just love supporting moms however I can. I'll probably do another virtual summit this year. So I'm always thinking of new things to do, how I can support women. So,
Fantastic. Well, I'll make sure that all of those links are below in our show notes so that you can connect with Melissa. And I know that I'm going to stay connected with Melissa. We have now recorded for each other's podcast. Tell everyone what your podcast is called, because as podcast listeners, we love to go find other shows.
ooh, yeah, it's called the Reawakened Mom. So it's all about that being reawakened and knowing like this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Like I want to do something different, and just kind of rediscovering yourself.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.